Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Grateful to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Wednesday, the 31st. We still got one more day in this month. I keep wanting June to be here for some reason earlier. I don't know why. Glad to have you here. You know what? You know why? It's because it's Pride Month, baby. Yeah, we're all excited. It's coming. It's coming. I guess the big question is that with all of the anti-woke backlash that's been going on against these corporations, and boy, has there been a backlash, Bud Light, Target, now Chick-fil-A, it has me wondering if Pride Month, coming month, is going to be, stop saying coming, it's going to be a little bit different this coming month. On a scale of 1 to 10, or shall we say, on a scale of Neil Patrick Harris, who could, passed as a straight guy in How I Met Your Mother, on a scale of Neil Patrick Harris to Dylan Mulvaney. I'm going to say he's your opposite, Samir. So Neil Patrick Harris to Dylan Mulvaney, 1 to 10. How gay do you think the corporations are going to go this year? I don't know. I mean, even as a guy who supports gay marriage and who supports live and let live, and I know I just lost all the conservatives right now. Oh, they're mad. Too bad. I'm not conservative. I'm a libertarian, for God's sakes. I just have to say that it is just fun watching the corporations having to deal with the backlash from people who don't want sexuality targeted towards children's. Oh no, the children's. Oh no, you can't groom the children's. So much crazy stuff going on. Apparently, Chick-fil-A has hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, so now conservatives are mad at Chick-fil-A. Apparently, the push to boycott Target has scared the crap out of Target. They have actually pulled items from store shelves. Benny Johnson, there's a video of him I've got, might play for you in a minute, where it shows him at Target one week with the pride displays for kids, and then the next week all that stuff is gone. Yeah. So apparently these boycotts are working. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the top of the show, I'm excited to talk to you about this article that just had me laughing. The rise of Latino white supremacy. The left really knows a lot about Hispanics. As a matter of fact, the vice president or the president of the United States, I guess vice president of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden, she's showed us that the left knows a lot about Hispanic culture.
So say it with me. Say Broadway. The future is ours. Thank you.
And topping our news on this very busy Wednesday, First Lady Jill Biden made a historic trip to Kern County today on this Cesar Chavez Day.
Broadway. Or how about this one? This was a lovely little clip too.
The diversity of this community, as distinct as the Bogotas of the Bronx.
Bogotas of the Bronx. Oh my God. Now I know that a lot of you haven't been to New York City or been embedded in the culture, but if Quest Fanning is tuned in this morning, and I'm sure he usually is, Quest, I know you're from Brooklyn, but all over New York City, they have these things called bogotas, right? Not bogotas, but it's not bogotas, right? It's bodegas, right? Bodegas, the bodegas. Camellia is messaging me this morning. God bless Camellia. She says no audio on the sound. It looks like it's firing. I'm seeing
as the blossoms of Miami.
Are you not seeing this? What's going on here? No audio on the thing.
So say it
Oh,
with
I
me.
know. Oh, she's talking about the sound effects. Oh, it's the Stream Deck. You know what? God, I tell you what. Today was one of those days where I just felt like a slug, just like dragging a slime trail getting out of bed this morning. Forgot to turn on the Stream Deck. How about this, guys? And so I don't embarrass myself any more than possible. How about this? Are we working now? Laughter? There it is. Haha, Austin, you idiot. Okay, but at least you were hearing Dr. Jill Biden. All right, let's continue here. We all know that in New York, they're not called bogotas.
Bogotas of the Bronx.
Bodegas.
As beautiful as the blossoms of Miami, and as unique as the breakfast tacos here in San Antonio.
She's comparing the Hispanics to breakfast tacos. Say Broadway. Say it with me.
So say it with me. Say Broadway. The future is ours. Thank
And topping our news on this very busy Wednesday.
Si, say, Broadway. Si, say it with me here. Si, say, Broadway. Si, say, Broadway. Well, you guys are going to start thinking that I got into John Burke's Delta 8 bars this morning, but I have not. Although sometimes they are tempting, I have to say. So I look over at all these beautiful, delicious gummies and chocolate bars that John Burke sent me from his Shell Shock CBD company, and I say to myself, I wonder what it would be like to do the Wake Up America show with a little bit of Delta 8. And so one of these days, I mean, you guys are going to have to dare me. It'll have to be like on a Friday when Steffi's here so that she can drive home because the stuff is just that powerful. But I am going to take this Friday off. Yeah, I know. I get a day off because I worked on Monday. I'm going fishing with my dad because I can. I'm the boss. I get to do what I please. Well, actually, you're the bosses. But what do you think? If I take some Delta 8 and go trout fishing, do you think my dad will even notice? I'm going with my little Hispanic nephew, Mario Gonzalez. No, it's Mario Peterson, my nephew. And I wonder if he's a little white supremacist. You know what? I'm going to ask my little nephew, Mario, a lot of questions, trying to determine if he is a little Mexican white supremacist. Well, you know what? He's a Mexican in a white family. So he just might be. I'm looking forward to asking him all of the difficult questions. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, you're like, what the hell is this all about? We're glad to have you here. Oh, a little bit of exciting news. Guess what? Apparently for the last week, and I didn't know that this functionality had started yet, although I had kind of teased out that it was coming. Apparently last week started the beginning of us streaming. Not only are we now streaming the Wake Up America show on Facebook, Twitch, Rumble, Kick, YouTube, and the Spreely app, but now because of our connection through the Spreely app for the last week, the Wake Up America show has been streaming live on Apple TV, Roku, Fire, and Hulu. Yeah. Through the Freedom Hub app, Spreely, which is Speak Freely, Spreely TV. So thanks to Spreely, we are actually now streaming. Some people are watching us on Apple, Fire, Hulu, and on Roku. So pretty exciting stuff. And apparently, when I spoke to our friends from the Freedom Hub app, they said that the numbers of people watching the Wake Up America show on those apps has been really big. So very exciting. Thanks so much. If you're watching us over there, I don't know if you can click like. I don't have those apps, but now I might need to get an Apple TV just so I can see it. But if you're watching us on any of those apps, or of course any of the other social apps, make sure that you click the like button if you can. I'll have to learn a little bit more about those. But if you're watching us in the morning live on any of those apps, we're grateful to have you tune in. And if you're wondering who I am, Austin Peterson, you can find out more about me on my wiki page, although my enemies wrote it, so it's not always very nice. But there are some other good resources that you can read about me's online if you type in Austin Peterson, and my last name is spelled S-E-N. So let's give it up for rising and freedoming in the morning while we are say Broadway. Yes, while we are streaming live on many of those other apps. It's pretty exciting. I'm excited about it, right? Brandon Meyer says, I pushed for Austin After Dark, but was a big no. Honestly, I would love to do something like that. But, you know, frankly, the thing is that I don't think that it would be that great because a lot of people it's kind of like Diet Coke versus Coke. You would rather see Tim Pool. You'd rather watch Tim Pool or like they're like real hard Joe Rogan and like late in the evening, the stoner guys getting drunk and stuff like that. They wouldn't, even if it was me being a little bit spicy or saucy, they'd probably want to go for the real spice and sauce, right? So, you know, because you know me, I'm a sweet boy. So sweet in the mornings, spicy in the evenings, but not spicy enough for a lot of people. All right, C-Sway Broadway, we can do it. Vance Ginn will be joining us this morning at 7:30 to talk about the debt ceiling deal that's got Thomas Massie trending internationally. Why is Thomas Massie, Representative Thomas Massie, trending? Well, it's because he says that he's going to vote for the debt ceiling bill in opposition to many other Freedom Caucus members. People like Lauren Boebert and Chip Roy of Texas have come out against it. And we'll hear from Vance Ginn about what's in the bill. We have to pass the bill to find out what's in it, right? Oh, smack. Somebody just bought from the AP for Liberty shop. Yo. I need like a horn noise or something like that. Something exciting whenever somebody buys from the AP for Liberty shop. Oh yeah, it was. You know what? They bought. Stephanie's going to be really excited about this. They bought the Make Taxation Theft Again golf balls. That's courtesy of Steffi. Way to go, Steffi. Steffi, because unfortunately I lost my employee and I'm trying to find a new one. Steffi has been stepping in and being my little slave laborer. So she's been posting all of my links for AP for Liberty shop and doing a damn good job at it because we just sold some golf balls. So great job, Steffi. Get your Make Taxation Theft Again golf balls over at apforlibertyshop.com. I'm going to curse real quick. Please forgive me. You can turn the sound down if you've got kids in the room in 5 seconds. I'm just going to curse real quick, but I think we're going to make some golf balls for the shop. Steffi, this is a good idea. Would you do me a favor, Steph, if you have some time, and drop that fuck around and find out logo on the golf balls for me? Because I think it would be great to go golfing and somebody's like, which golf ball is yours? And you could be like, fuck around and find out. And then they're like, what did you say? And then you could be like, oh no, it's the one that says fuck around and find out. And then they're all like, oh, ha, ha, ha. So yeah, so coming soon, fuck around and find out golf balls. All right, let's get back to the show here. The rise of Latino white supremacy. Sorry for the curses. The rise of Latino white supremacy, says the New Yorker. I said the Atlantic mistakenly this morning. Again, I'm a little bit tired. Sorry about that. My bad. The rise of Latino white supremacy. It doesn't have to make sense because it's America.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to
At a time of rising racial violence, Latinos are potential perpetrators and potential victims. You see, if anybody ever for one heartbeat of a second doesn't completely 100% buy into the left's woke ideology, then you are a white supremacist. You could be a black white supremacist. You could be a Latino white supremacist. You could be an Indian white supremacist. You can be apparently Hitler's army was the most diverse army in all of Europe in 1940s. See, say, Broadway. That was actually after Gott mit uns. If you ever saw like one of the Nazi belt buckles underneath Gott mit uns in German, which means God with us, underneath that it said "Si se Broadway" underneath the belt buckle. Yes, it's true. It's true. On May 6th, this is how the article in the New Yorker goes. On May 6th, it reads like an article in the Babylon Bee. A 33-year-old Mexican-American man named Mauricio Garcia shot and killed. Well, was he Mexican or was he American is what I want to know. When you say Mexican-American, that can sometimes be confusing. Like I know when you say African-American, what you really mean are black people in the United States who are not African at all. They're just black people in the United States. They're Americans, right? We're all Americans if you're an American, right? Mexican-American. I don't know what that means. Was he Mexican or was he American? Okay. Mauricio Garcia, he shot and killed 8 people in an outlet mall in Texas. Then he was shot and killed by an off-duty cop. Because of the white supremacist views the shooter expressed in a diary and online, many were shocked that he was a Latino. Were we shocked? Why would we be shocked? Why would we be shocked? You think this is the first time an insane person has espoused Nazi views and gone on a killing spree? Like nothing like this has ever happened before, and they didn't happen to be pure white as the driven snow, right? There are plenty of people who are mentally insane, and to them, it's not an ethnic thing. They're just effing nuts. And what I find interesting about this story too, and how the left has latched onto it, right? Because the shooter had some Nazi ideologies, of course, because he said some nice things about Nazis. He's a white supremacist. And of course, we're going to sideswipe it right here. It's because of the white supremacist nature of the United States, which is, excuse me, got a little cough there. Then of course they latch onto it. But what I find fascinating about this is that we can actually analyze the manifesto of this shooter. See, the manifesto of this shooter is not so terrible that we can't publicly analyze it. See, the manifesto of this shooter, it's important that we have access to this one so that we could publicly dissect it in articles like this. However, wasn't there a shooting that happened just not too long ago? Little town in called Nashville. Ever heard of it? Or what happened there? Well, there's a shooting there, and I seem to remember there being a manifesto written by that shooter. Have we seen that manifesto from that shooter? No, actually, we have not. I wonder why. I wonder, and I wonder. Why wonder why, why they won't show us the shooter a manifesto because they were gay. A run, a renegade. Maybe you guys really are going to think that I had some Delta 8, but I have not. I'm just in a good mood, even though I'm tired of shit. Watch your language, AP. So morning show. People got kids. They're listening to the show. I know. I don't usually curse, not even this much. All right, I got to go to a brief commercial break so I can get ready for the next segment because I was goofing around so much I wasn't paying enough attention. What's next? I don't even know. I know we got Vance Ginn coming up at 7:30. Oh, God, the Memorial Day violence. You see these kids beat up Marines? You don't want to hear about that story. You want to see me talk about Target and Chick-fil-A, don't you? Screw that. Austin, wake up. Why don't you put on a little makeup? We'll be back with more on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. It's anarchy. Anarchy.
Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Step right up, ladies and gents, to learn about the coolest president yet. He's not just any old prez, he's Calvin Coolidge, and boy oh boy is he different from the rest. He was quiet as a mouse, but don't you underestimate his power. He knew how to handle money, and he didn't waste an hour. He cut taxes, lowered debt, and balanced the budget with ease. No wonder the Roaring '20s brought such prosperity and peace. But don't take my word for it. Grab a copy of Calvin the Coolest President and see for yourself. It's a children's book that'll make you smile and help your little ones learn about wealth. You can find it on Amazon Kindle or get your hands on a paperback at apforlibertyshop.com. Look on down and get yourself a copy of the book.
The Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Hello, this is Barack Obama, and let me tell you why Austin Peterson stinks, and you should never pay attention to anything that he has to say. First of all, he's a libertarian, and we all know libertarians are idiots. They don't realize how important government is to everything that we do. I recently became aware that Austin has opened up a libertarian shop at apforlibertyshop.com. Now, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me that you never ever visit apforlibertyshop.com. With all of the great Liberty merchandise there, the last thing that we need to do is to get people spreading this message around the country, because then they might start thinking that they don't need government. And that's the last thing that good Democrats like us want. So if you love democracy, like me, and hate freedom, then don't visit AP for Liberty Shop. Like I said, whatever you do, do not visit apforlibertyshop.com. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
So say it with me. Si se puede. The future is ours. Thank you.
And topping our news on this very busy Wednesday, First Lady Jill Biden made a historic trip to Kern County today on this Cesar Chavez Day.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Glad to have you here. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're feeling good today. I don't know that I'm feeling good, but I'm sure pretending like I am. Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Wednesday, which means, of course, that we've got a lot of exciting guests and topics for you today. We've got Vance Ginn joining us in studio. Not in studio, I wish. Vance Ginn will be joining us on camera here in a few minutes to talk about the debt ceiling deal heading for a House vote and why Thomas Massie is trending on Twitter because he said he'd vote for it. We'll talk about that in just a few with Vance, an economist of mighty brain power. And then the mightiest brain of all, Judge Andrew Napolitano, will be joining us this morning at 8 a.m. to talk about how to fight the woke as a libertarians. It's an ongoing theme. I want to hear the judge's take on wokeism, specifically the culture wars. We always hear from him when it comes to legal topics, sure, but as a libertarian, how does he feel about things like boycotts against Bud Light and all those kinds of cultural issues that are driving a lot of discussion in our country right now, especially and when it comes to Chick-fil-A, sparking anti-woke outrage for their VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion post. Dang it. Chick-fil-A, the chicken sandwich chain long beloved by conservatives for their long-standing opposition to same-sex marriage, now sparking boycott calls after announcing it has hired an executive in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
No, God! No, God, please,
yes, no, please, no. The Atlanta-based company announced Tuesday it was naming Eric McReynolds to the post of vice president of DEI. I didn't know that there were black guys with Irish names. They've been igniting. Yeah. FBI, open up! Sorry, I gotta be careful what I say. McReynolds has been employed by Chick-fil-A since 2007. He was promoted to the position of vice president of DEI in November. But the recent LGBTQ controversies, including brands like Bud Light and Target and Kohl's, have triggered the scrutiny of other corporate actors. Corporate America's embrace of DEI has been criticized by conservatives who claim it is discriminatory based on race and gender. Boy, this is the whitest black guy I have ever seen. Matt Unruh says, thanks to everyone who prayed and reached out to me the past few months. It's possible I can join you guys in Mo in August. Boy, that is great news. And thanks so much for the super chat, Matt. I'm going to put the picture up of this guy right here. Somebody tell me if this is me, but just, if this is racist. Chick-fil-A, here's the article. But here's the black guy. Now, look at that guy right there. Now, you tell me right there. That's the chief of their diversity, equity, and inclusion. I feel like he should be disqualified. There we go. I don't know. Is that guy diverse enough? Haven't you guys heard about the new thing where it's like, in order to really be considered black, you got to be dark. If Joe Biden can say, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, then I can say, this guy's not black enough to be the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Chick-fil-A. How about that? Yes. So that guy's out. speaking of diversity, equity, inclusion, Target has taken a pretty strong backlash from their LGBTQ kids collection, which has people up in arms. Sarah Palacios leaving. No, Sarah says she's got to go. Well, we will miss you.
God, please, no.
Definitely have to catch the replay for sure. That's just Seinfeld with a tan, says Chris Morrow. Very funny, very funny. Good morning to all of our friends over on the live stream. Make sure you smash that like button if you're here joining us today. We're grateful to have all of our friends over on YouTube as well as on Rumble, Twitch, a billion other places. We're on Apple TV. We're on freaking Hulu. We're on, God, we're damn near everywhere. Rumble, what's going on, Rumblers? Nice to see y'all here today. You guys being awful quiet today over on Rumble. Why don't you give us a like and say hello, drop a comment, let us know. How are you feeling today? We'd love to hear from our Rumblers because you guys have really been awesome to us lately. Okay, let's hear from Benny Johnson. I almost call him Benny South Street. If anybody here gets the Benny South Street reference right now, I will give you $1 million internet bucks. It's basically like Chuck E. Cheese coins. How about that? Benny South Street, anybody? Good morning, Anna Marie. Nice to see you. Well, let's head back over to our Twitter weirdness scene. There's the white-skinned black guy. That's racist. Let's see what Benny had to say from his report from Target, and they're backing off of their woke inclusionary policies. Take a listen.
What's up, guys? Live from ground zero of the Boycott Target campaign, a whistleblower from inside of Target has actually given us corporate directives as it pertains to the Pride display this year. These corporate directives say that they need to remove a huge portion of the items permanently, and they're going to get rid of the child mannequins. They're going to get rid of the Pride section inside of the children's department effectively at Target. Is any of this real? Is it actually happening? And how drastic are these changes? Well, we're going to our Target, the same Target that we went to actually last week to show you this. We're going to see what's up. Wow. Guys, this is wild. There used to be a massive, in-your-face display right here, just a couple of steps into the store, right? So there's the entrance. Here's where the display was. This is also happens to be the children's section, right? You can see all the kids' clothing and apparel and stuff. Now that entire display is gone. So apparently that memo was read. The memo specifically said you got to move those child mannequins back to the children's section, and they gone. The satanic designer is gone. This is the Satanist.
Satanic designer? Satan respects pronouns?
Satanist.
I don't think Satan would respect pronouns.
Evaporated. Baby items now are gone. So now you can't find the baby bibs. You can't find any of the children's clothes.
It's not there.
I mean, you got little baby stuff here. And they've taken
little
away
gay
some
babies.
Of the,
you know what they call gay babies, don't you? They call them
no agenda
babies.
Here we go. Again.
Gay babies.
That's the kid section. Right here.
All right, I'm not going to do a real long break here. I think I'm just going to go to the standby screen for a minute while I go get Vance Ginn. He's ready, waiting in the wings. I'm going to go get him. We'll be right back to talk about the debt ceiling deal, why Thomas Massie is trending internationally. International love. And we'll be right back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com. Good morning. Thanks for waiting. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. All right, enough about gabies, enough about Target, enough about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Oh, come on, don't act so disappointed. Because you've got a great guest coming up to talk about the debt ceiling deal. If we have to talk about economics, can we at least make it a little bit more interesting? Well, my next guest does it the best. He's Vance Ginn. He's a former senior economist at the Trump White House's Office of Management and Budget, and he's also he's a consultant these days too for Ginn Economic Consulting. Hope I got that right. It's a little early still. Vance, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We're grateful to have you here.
Hey, Austin, it's a pleasure to be with you, and you got it all right, so perfect.
Okay, good. I'm a little sluggish this morning, but I've been trying to catch up with what's happening with the debt ceiling deal. I saw that our favorite representative, Thomas Massie, in Congress kind of shocked me when I saw he was trending on Twitter this morning. That's usually not a good thing. But it turns out that he says that he's going to vote for the debt ceiling deal. And his reasoning was that when he was looking at it, he said that the engineer in him wanted to vote for it, but the politician did not. Essentially, that he thought that this was actually going to cut spending, but that he thought that if he really wanted to score political points with the base, that he should vote against it, but that the right thing to do was vote for it in order to cut spending. What was your take on this?
Yeah, Austin, I was surprised to see Representative Massie say that he was going to be for the bill. And, I think just to take a step back, like where are we at right now? We're at a situation where we've got more than $31.4 trillion in national debt. The debt ceiling was $31.4 trillion. So they've used some extraordinary measures by Treasury to pay the bills, right, for a while. But they're saying, okay, these dollars, at first it was June 1st that they were going to run out of money. Now they're saying June 5th. I don't know when that exact date is, but I know it's coming soon. And it's been coming for a long time from excessive spending to get to this situation that we are today. And that's why this debt ceiling is so important. It's really the only check that we have on Congress. I mean, we don't have a spending limit like 40, most of the states, there are about 35 states that have a spending limit or a balanced budget amendment. 49 states have a balanced budget amendment. And so we don't have those sort of fiscal rules and checks and balances in place in that sense. And so the debt ceiling is really all we got. And I think it's an important time to come in and make key reforms so that we're not just kicking the can down the road. And so whenever I'm looking at this deal, and I should say that the bill that was passed by the House Republicans initially was a good bill that was going to cut spending by hundreds of billions of dollars, limit spending over time, roll back some of the money going to the IRS. So IRS agents are going to come after us. All the green energy stuff, the tax credits for electric vehicles, just this boondoggle that was in the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of that was going to be pared back, and none of that really is in this latest deal between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden. It cuts the budget. I'll put air quotes under cuts here, about $30 billion, limits spending over the next 2 years by 1%. And then there's some spending restraint over the next 4 years, but all that's in the out years. And the big part here, Austin, is that they're raising the debt ceiling for 2 years, all the way through January of 2025, with as much money as they want to increase. So you're basically giving free rein on them to ratchet up spending, to ratchet up the debt, and make it worse overall for the people. And so I don't necessarily see this as a good thing. I mean, I get it, maybe why Massie and some others are wanting to vote for this, because they don't want to default on the debt. But some of these big actions, that's why I started off where I did, of how we've got to where we are today, which has been a bipartisan problem. You've got to make sure that you make these key reforms, or we're just going to kick the can down the road. We're going to be at this here pretty soon again, and it's not going to be a good situation for Americans.
Yeah, no kidding. Barney Styles over in the live stream says, I love that using the actual collected revenue to pay expenses is called extraordinary. Very good comment there, Barney. Thank you.
That is a good one.
Yes, appreciate that. You can text the show today as well at 573-319-1586. Again, the text line is open at 573-319-1586. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, make sure you smash that like button. I'm joined now by economist Vance Ginn talking about the debt ceiling debate. When it comes to the idea of default, right, I've heard from people on the right who say that we've defaulted before, but we've never really defaulted before in the way that we would default if we failed to raise the debt ceiling, Vance. That would be uncharted territory, wouldn't it?
It would be, and it's something that would be costly for the American people. Whenever you think about higher interest rates would soar, but they're already soaring. We've seen interest rates go up by quite a bit, but which would influence car loans, mortgage rates, and everything else that are out there in the economy, slow down business investment. And so it would hit the value of the dollar, which has also been taking a hit over time as well. And so it would put everything that's been happening in the last couple of years, I think, on steroids and say, you know what, there is a cost. The cost of this debt is coming home to roost, and here it is in plain simple terms, so where everyone can see. Because otherwise, they have just been, basically covering up this debt problem for so long. That's why I think some have called it a default. I know Ron Paul has even called it that we've been in default for a long time. Because what do? They just print money. They just print money, put more money into the economy, and make it look like that we're not defaulting, because we're only talking really about the national debt of $31.4 trillion. If you look at the unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare in the out years, we're over $100 trillion. I've seen some estimates as close as $250 trillion. So we can't pay for that. That is essentially a default if we don't do something now to make some key reforms. And some, Republicans have not wanted to talk about Social Security and Medicare. I think we have to have those on the table. Those are the biggest drivers of our spending problem, which weren't even touched within this debt deal. And so there are some issues that need to happen, and this is going to create even more of a situation to where, I think we're in a recession now. This is going to make the situation even worse. And I'm not so sure that the markets are going to come back after this debt deal is passed. They will initially, because they're like, yes, something is done. You bring about a little bit of certainty to the marketplace, but it does nothing for our long-term trajectory of out of control spending and out of control debt that's going to lead us, less prosperous overall. And, there are some positives, I should say, the work requirements, but it's really weak. The one they finally passed, they increased it for those from 49 years old to 54. Okay. And it's able bodies, folks who can work, right, without dependents, so without kids or anything. And it's only for that group that they created work requirements for SNAP, for food stamps. So they strengthened some work requirements there. But what about for Medicaid? What about TANF and others? They don't want that. And I don't understand why we can't have a situation and talk about, look, if you're going to be on these programs, there should be a work requirement, a training requirement, because that is how you get to self-sufficiency, not by being more dependent on government.
If you're just tuning in the Wake Up America show, I'm Austin Peterson. You are listening now to Vance Ginn. He is a former senior economist under the Trump administration at the Office of Management and Budget. He's also an economic consultant with Ginn Economic Consulting, and he's joining us now to discuss the debt ceiling deal that's happening right now. And it's just weird to see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to vote against the debt ceiling increase. Thomas Massie is going to vote for it. We're living in a bizarro world. Massie is getting beaten up online by a lot of people. They're saying things like it leaves our border wide open and puts no limit on Ukrainian aid. And Massie is kind of like wryly responding, saying it also doesn't stop abortion, abolish the ATF, or guarantee world peace. I mean, it doesn't, there is never going to be any kind of a perfect bill. And certainly, I don't think I want to see the United States government default, Vance, because, I have investments, right? I hold dollars, right? I don't want to see any more devaluation. Inflation is already hitting me and my family pretty hard, right? We have to make some difficult decisions about how we want to spend our money and things like that. And God, as a millennial and a geriatric millennial, I think you and I are about the same age. It'd be nice to have a good economy for once in our entire freaking adult lives. That in the time that you and I have lived, we have not seen a really good, strong economy, not for very long. And so it's just infuriating to me. And I know I'm bringing this up in generational terms. Everybody has a right to be upset, but it's infuriating to me that we cannot get our act together. It at some point, like the devil inside, there's an angel on my shoulder and a devil on the other one. The devil is saying, you know what, burn it all down, default. Is there a little devil on your shoulder too, Vance?
Austin, there is a little devil on my shoulder too that's telling me that, and you're right. I mean, I'm a millennial, right at the edge of it, and what's happening right now has been destructive for us, for younger generations even. They're mortgaging our future for us to pay higher taxes so they don't have to pay them today. And they are paying them to the sense of higher interest rates and higher inflation today, but not to the extent that we're going to have to pay for them in the future, which is going to rob us of our prosperity, our opportunity to really live the American dream and everything else. It's really going to come home to roost. It's one reason why some countries are saying, you know what, I'm not going to have the reserve currency be in or buy dollars anymore. I'm going to move into Chinese yuan or the European euro. And so the dollar may not be the reserve currency of the world much longer, which has given us some opportunity to be profligate spending and just spending too much. But that's all going to come home to roost as well. But also, I think what you mentioned earlier, which was key, is that for our families, we've been making difficult choices because of inflation, because of interest rates, because of the bad decisions that are made out of Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. is not making those difficult choices that they need to be making. You know, some say that politicians and government should budget like a family. I actually think that they should budget even more conservatively than a family because it's not their money. It's our money. You spend somebody else's money much differently than you spend your own. And government is spending somebody else's money every time. And so they continue to waste it along the way, you know, spending it on out of control wars, spending it on welfare that many people shouldn't be on. You know, all these things are really coming home to roost now. And we've got to make a decision. And you know, I don't want to see us default either, right? And I think we should have been making better decisions before we got to this point. And we've got to make sure that if we're going to kick the can down the road, that it's for good reason. And I don't think that raising the debt ceiling to 2025, January 2025, is a good idea given what's been happening over the last couple of years. And so if anything, you know, maybe they might have just said, you know what, let's raise it for 2 months. Why not just do it for a short period of time? I don't like that in the sense that they should have already done it out of these 100+ days they've been working on it. But what the heck? I mean, let's do something to make these difficult choices for the American people.
Yeah, I'm getting a little tired of this constant debt ceiling battle. That's this gamesmanship that ends up playing politics with people's lives. And I know, here's the thing, Vance, you and I have seen what happens when they do shut down the government. They don't shut down the FBI. They're still coming around looking for guys with bump stocks and you know, short barrel shotguns in the woods of Missouri. What they do is they shut down the World War II memorials, right? They do all of these things that are the theater of government shutdowns. They continue to print, they continue to spend as if as if the government never shut down. It doesn't seem to make any difference, Vance. It all seems to be a joke. It's all fake. And you know, listen, I'm not a doom and I'm not a doomer, right? A doom and gloomer or things like that. But you know, there's a reason why I'm very comfortable advocating that people buy gold, because I think that it's always a good hedge against what we could be faced with. But here's the thing, Vance. I mean, when you talk about the unfunded liabilities and things like that, people can't wrap their head around the 32 trillion. Okay. How the hell are they supposed to this concept of the unfunded liabilities? This is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, right? We're talking about, right?
Yeah.
$250 trillion. That is default. What the hell? At some point, you know what? Just print it. You know what we ought to do is we ought to for the reparations, because I hear that some people are demanding $16 trillion in reparations. We ought to just do what the Fed said that they would do and print a platinum coin and just say, here you go, and just pass it out. There's the $16 trillion right there in your platinum coin. Good luck spending it.
Yeah, done and done. That's it. That's all we gotta do. Yeah. I wish things were that easy sometimes.
They were. I know the Fed was talking about well, you know what? Why not just do it? Go ahead, do it. Print a platinum, print up 32 trillion of them, and then just pay the debt. There you go. Give it to China. There you go. There's $1 trillion.
Oh man, it's wild the things we're having to talk about now. You know, to think that we'd be in this situation as America. Something I was thinking about, Austin, was that Monday was Memorial Day. So we are thankful for those who have died and for our freedoms in the past and everything else, trying to preserve our freedom. And yet we're here in a situation right now where we're talking about the debt deal at $31 trillion, where our founding fathers are surely rolling over in their grave based on what's happening today. And I don't, look, I mean, I'm much more libertarian, right? Or a classical liberal. And I don't care if somebody's conservative, a progressive, libertarian. I think we could all figure out better ways to spend $1 trillion than on debt payments.
Yes.
You know, I would rather it be in people's pockets, okay? But some others might want to spend it somewhere else. That's a massive amount of money. And we're expected to run $2 trillion a year just in deficits over the next decade. That's 20 trillion more dollars that we're going to be up to $55 trillion just over the next decade. And this is just ridiculous that we've got to get control over.
Do you know who was the last president to pay off the national debt?
Jackson?
It might be Jackson. Hold on, I'm asking ChatGPT real quick to make sure I'm not wrong.
I believe it's President Jackson, Andrew Jackson.
ChatGPT doesn't know the answer to it. It might be Jackson. I thought it was Calvin Coolidge. Did he not?
Coolidge paid down the deficit and the debt quite a bit, but not to zero.
He didn't retire. Andrew Jackson was the last one to pay off the debt.
Yes. And hey, by the way, some of the audience may like this. On my Let People Prosper show that you can find on all your podcast platforms, I just had on Amity Schlaze, who wrote the Calvin Coolidge book, who was always awesome. And she also wrote Forgotten Man and The Great Society. But we talked all about Calvin Coolidge and the how he cut government spending and the debt over that period, and how he had the Roaring '20s. He was one of the first ones that actually cut taxes. He's one of my favorite presidents, and there's not as much talk about him as there are others. And so we talked a lot about that.
Yeah. Bill Clinton ran a surplus for a few years, Chris Morrill says.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What
in
is
4 years.
The Democratic presidents and the Republican, Republicans are fiscal conservatives when Democrats, are in office. I don't know what the hell we're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last time that we had a really big deal was a Budget Control Act of 2011 due to the debt ceiling discussion around whenever Obama was president and the Republicans were in charge of the House and Senate. And they came up with the Budget Control Act of 2011, which actually restrained spending for about 3 or 4 years. And that was a pretty good period, not a flourishing time, but better for our debt and everything else compared to where we've been after that, because then they kept suspending it. Even during the Trump years, they would suspend the Budget Control Act so there could be more spending and more deficits.
Oh, God, Vance.
Yeah.
The dire times that we live in, for those of us who actually still care about economics. My theory is that a lot of Republicans, it's not necessarily that they're anti-capitalist, right? I think that they would be more pro-capitalist if it was like fashionable or cool. But I think probably a lot of them, Vance, they just look at those numbers and they just are like, screw it.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of them have just given up and say, you know what, might as well just spend into oblivion and just, put people, give people as much of their own money back as possible. For a lot of the Republicans, for the Democrats, they're just, obviously they're insane. But for, I think a lot of Republicans, they've probably just are just throwing their hands up and saying, you know what, it doesn't matter anymore. Sorry to end on such a downer note, Vance. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we let you go?
Well, I mean, I try to be optimistic over time. I'm an optimistic economist, which usually doesn't go together.
Right.
And I'm hopeful that there will be a tide change, kind of like the Tea Party, where there was interest in spending again, to where we've really got to cut spending. Make spending bad again is something I've said before, and I think that's important to let people prosper at the end of the day. Because if we don't get control of spending, we're not going to get control of deficits or anything else. And at the end, and also, have families take care of themselves. If you get your own situation in shape, then DC doesn't matter as much. It still matters what they're doing, but if you get your own stuff in shape, you'll be in a much better position than you otherwise would.
There he is. He's Vance Ginn. He is a former senior economist under the Trump administration, as well as the head of Ginn Economic Consulting. Vance, thanks so much for getting early and for joining us this time. Sorry for the dour topic, but we will hopefully have you back on soon, maybe for some good news. We'll see. Take care, Vance.
Sounds good, Austin. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, it wasn't all just a setup for a commercial about gold and silver, but I'll tell you, maybe not the worst investment of your time, of your dollars and your time, to give our friends a call over at Lear Capital today. 1-800-885-2175 is the phone line. Listen, you can't see these bank collapses going on and this debt ceiling gamesmanship and say to yourself, that's a good idea for me to just keep all my money in stocks and paper money and things like that. It might be a good idea for you to have something tangible in your safe or in your vault like Scrooge McDuck, as you can see on the screen right now. My friends over at Lear Capital have a great informational packet that you can get for free by calling them now at 1-800-885-2175. That's 1-800-885-2175. give them a call today. Or if you are phone averse, as so many of my generation and younger are, you can wimp out and go to LearAustin.com. Just kidding. I'm not saying you're a wimp. Visit LearAustin.com and sign up for that free gold and silver information packet so that you can take a portion of your retirement savings and put it into actual physical metals. Yes, actual physical metals, not paper metal, a paper that's backed by metal or anything like that. You can actually invest a portion of your retirement account with tax advantages using Lear Capital's financial, should I say schemes? Is a financial situation? What's the word I'm looking for here? I don't know. Maybe I should have a script for these things, but then they wouldn't be as fun. Visit LearAustin.com. That's LearAustin.com and find out more today about how to invest your retirement, portion of your retirement, into gold and silver today. When we get back, a group of angry teenagers attacked 2 Marines who asked them to please stop lighting fireworks. Got the video. We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Good morning to the Cantina crew. This is Elon Musk, the CEO of Twitter. And I just want to say thank you for watching the Wake Up America Show. I've decided that Austin Peterson will be the new CEO of Twitter.com, effective immediately. First thing to do, though, is I've got to go and blast off into space.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian, and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
If I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors, what would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers
We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist! Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins!
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Step right up, ladies and gents, to learn about the coolest president yet. He's not just any old prez, he's Calvin Coolidge, and boy oh boy is he different from the rest. He was quiet as a mouse, but don't you underestimate his power. He knew how to handle money, and he didn't waste an hour. He cut taxes, lowered debt, and balanced the budget with ease. No wonder the roaring 20s brought such prosperity and peace. But don't take my word for it, grab a copy of Calvin the Coolest President and see for yourself. It's a children's book that'll make you smile and help your little ones learn about wealth. You can find it on Amazon Kindle or get your hands on a paperback at apforlibertyshop.com. So come on down and get yourself a copy of the book that's making waves all around town. You won't regret it, so get ready to be floored because Calvin Coolidge, well, folks, he really scored.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble, Molly.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
any real-world experience.
It's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. All right, well, fresh from his trip to Switzerland. You missed him last week, but he's joining us now. I know he's your favorite guest because the numbers on the show just explode whenever he comes on. He is the popular host of the Judging Freedom podcast, a good friend of the show, and a good friend of mine. He's Judge Napolitano, and he's joining us live right now. Good morning, Judge. Nice to see you. How was
Good morning, Austin. A pleasure to be with you. Thank you again for the generous introduction.
I hope you had a wonderful trip, Judge. A lot of people missed you last week, but we heard you had a wonderful trip to Switzerland, and you got to give speeches at law schools out there, and sir, it sounded very exciting from the way you described it.
It was very exciting, and there was one topic that dominated everything in their questions after my lectures, and that was the legal woes of one Donald Trump.
Oh boy. Oh boy, I would hesitate to think that Swiss, is that what we call them? The Swiss have a high opinion of him, but you never know. Judge, I'd like to ask you, about the gamesmanship going on with the debt ceiling fight here in the United States. Because Judge, when you and I were working together at Fox and you were on Freedom Watch, we were fighting the debt ceiling battle back then, the same as we were now. It doesn't seem like a whole lot's changed except for the massive numbers, which to me at this point seem to have no meaning anymore, Judge, because you could say $32 trillion of debt, but you and I know damn well that there's about $250 trillion worth of unfunded liabilities that nobody wants to address in the room, least of all Donald Trump. What do we do?
Well, this is a symptom of democracy gone crazy, because the people know that the public treasury is a public trough, and they will send people to Washington, whether they call themselves Republicans or Democrats, who will bring home the biggest piece of the pie. There's about 2 or 3 dozen members of the House of Representatives and maybe just 2 members of the Senate who see this for what it is, a canard to dupe the public into voting to reelect them by giving away money today that won't have to be repaid for generations yet to come. We're still paying debt on the money Woodrow Wilson borrowed to fund World War I. That was 110 years ago. The interest has come to 50%. He borrowed $30 billion. We paid $15 billion in interest. We still owe the principal. This is the way the government operates. And unless and until what Jefferson offered, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and what Madison offered, the author of the Constitution itself, which is nullification and secession, until something like that comes to pass, this will just continue to get worse and worse and worse. There are not 2 parties in the Congress. Kevin McCarthy negotiated like Nancy Pelosi because they're in the same party. It's the pro-war, pro-welfare state, pro-national security state, pro-big government party, with a Republican wing and a Democrat wing, each trying to get as much of the pie for as many of their base as they can. None, with the exception of those few in the House and 2 in the Senate, willing to shrink the government down to the confines, as Jefferson said, chain it down to the confines of the Constitution.
Judge, this morning I'm seeing that our friend Congressman Thomas Massie is trending on Twitter. So this means that everybody is talking about what Massie is saying this morning. And what Massie is saying is that he says, I respect opposition to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, but I am voting yes. I've been in Congress for a decade. This is the first real bill that cuts spending. It also includes an automatic 1% cut to spending on January 1st if Congress doesn't pass the 12 appropriation bills. So what if they pass the 12 appropriations bills? What's your take on this, Judge?
You know, criticizing Thomas Massie would be like criticizing Austin Peterson. It's very difficult for me to do that. But the best I can say is he sees this as the least worst alternative. It is a horrific alternative. Ask Congressman Massie what the debt ceiling will be once this is passed. He can't answer that. There's no number in the bill. There is no debt ceiling after this bill. The president can borrow as much money as he wants. The Congress can spend as much money as they want. This bill also presumes that the present Congress, which ends on January 3rd, 4th, or 5th, 2025, can control what future Congresses will do, and it can't. Congress can only control itself. This is one of the worst pieces of legislation to come down the pike. The best I can say, because I love Thomas Massie, is that there must be some benefit to his otherwise staunch libertarian views surviving in the House that will come by his voting for this. But I'm with Andy Biggs and the other Republicans who denounced this yesterday. And the denunciation is more than a denunciation. This may end up in Speaker McCarthy going back to being Representative McCarthy because of the way the crazy House of Representatives rules work. One member of the House can declare the Speaker chair empty, and then they take a vote. If 5 Republicans don't vote or vote against him, guess what? Hakeem Jeffries becomes the Speaker of the House. Thank you. Thank you, Republicans.
We certainly don't want to see that. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Make sure you click that like button on the channel and subscribe if you're enjoying the commentary that you're hearing this morning. Help us to spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty, which is what my current host guest is all about. Judge Andrew Napolitano. He's the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, and he's got a weekly column at judgenap.com, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But first, Judge, I'd like to talk to you about a topic that I don't think you and I have ever really broached, whether even privately or in our public discussions here. This is the topic of wokism, specifically cultural Marxism, or some might call it critical theory, which the left has been pushing not just through government institutions like public schools, but they're also trying to push through corporate governance boards like environmental and social governance boards in order to ensure that corporate America carries out an agenda that advances the ideas of leftism, communism, socialism, all the ideals that you and I argue against on a daily basis. This is sort of a multi-headed hydra that we're facing here. Not only are we fighting this on the government front, Judge, but we're fighting this in regards to in the free market, where Target and Bud Light and Kohl's and now even Chick-fil-A are the targets of boycotts by conservatives and some libertarians who are pushing back against what we call wokeism by enacting boycotts. So I wonder, Judge, what your take is on this from an intellectual perspective, knowing that we're fighting against Fabian socialism, the literal wolves in sheep, or I guess not the literal, but the metaphorical wolves in sheep's clothing. How do you see this struggle? I mean, it's been one that's been going on since the height of the progressive era, Judge, and now it seems to be more virulent than ever. Can I get your take on this from a broad perspective?
Well, from a broad perspective, I condemn it, but of course, I defend the freedom of speech of those who want to offer it. But the reason cultural Marxism is expanding is because Judeo-Christian values, the concept of right and wrong, which everybody knows from their heart when they see something, if it's right or wrong, has been dissipated in America today. The concept of, I know that this is wrong when I see it, the concept that we all have natural understanding of what is good and what is evil, has been dissipated in the modern era. I think we should study this stuff. I think we should know about it. I think we should know the nefarious objectives that the left is up to. And just as when there was a difference between the states, you could vote with your feet, you can vote with your wallet. You cannot buy Bud Light if you think they're being offensive to you or absolutely crazy by the manner in which they offer their product. I'm unaware of what Chick-fil-A is doing, but I assume it's something similar to that. And it'll probably have a similar backlash to Bud Light. The other problem is that so many of these corporations do business with government. And government, of course, is going to put strings onto those businesses. If you've ever read the requirements for being an outside vendor to the federal government, it sounds like it was written by the faculty of Princeton University or some otherwise very, very liberal entity. And you have to agree to all this nonsense about what you say and do and how your people look and how they treat everybody else and who you can hire before the feds will give you a dime. And the federal dime, of course, is so attractive. They spend so much money thanks to Republicans caving and letting them borrow all they want, that these entities will give in, accept the wokism, accept the strings in return for the cash. When I taught legal philosophy at Brooklyn Law School, really was required by faculty regulations to include in that course critical race theory, which teaches that the entire criminal justice and judicial system of the United States of America is inherently racist. You can teach that. And if you teach it right, properly, the students will see how absurd it is. And you'll actually do a positive good by including that in the curriculum. It can't hold a candle to the idea that our rights come from our humanity. And if you teach those subjects properly, students will learn them properly. But if you teach it in a browbeating way, you will agree with me that whites are bad because they've suppressed everybody else. Then you're going to produce very stilted thinking lawyers who are going to become stilted thinking judges and prosecutors. And this is going to become worse a generation from now.
One of the challenges with that, Judge, is, for example, my brother, who is a music teacher, wanted to apply for a job in academia. But in order for him to qualify for that job, he had to sign a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that goes against his own classical liberal principles. But the problem is we're talking here about a publicly funded institution, Judge. We're talking about, a university that gets my tax dollars. I mean, it's not right that in order for people to get a job working at a public university that I pay for, and maybe we don't think it, the answer is we shouldn't have to pay for it. That's true. But at the end of the day, we should be fighting against the requirement of those kinds of standards to be able to get a job in academia, shouldn't we?
They absolutely violate your brother's freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of the press if he had to sign anything. Absolutely violate it. The government schools are subject to the First Amendment. Private schools are subject to the First Amendment because they accept government funds and agree to be subject to it. There are about maybe a dozen institutes of higher education in the United States, Hillsdale College, Christendom College, that accept no federal funds. In fact, they won't even allow students to receive federal funds for their scholarships. They'll get the scholarships for the students. So there's no federal strings. So there's no interference whatsoever with the freedom of speech. But the interference with the freedom of speech is a very, very serious issue today in academia, and the courts keep looking the other way. Somebody's going to bring a major challenge against a major state-owned institution, University of Michigan, Rutgers, SUNY, University of Texas, some huge state institution. If it gets to this court, this Supreme Court, the institution will lose. This Supreme Court has been terrific and almost unanimous on free speech issues.
Judge, one of our commenters brought up an interesting quote that I'd like to pose to you. He says, this is from a conservative who is highly critical of libertarianism. His name is Iran McIntyre. He says, the ones who want to force their worldview are always going to beat those who want to be left alone. The absence of morality leaves a vacuum for immorality. In other words, the conservative here is saying that if we do not force our worldview on others, then we will have a worldview forced on us. Because the type of people like who you and I are, who just want to be left alone, are not the type to engage in battles or wars, or who have tactics or play practical politics to be able to protect our right to be left alone. And Judge, I mean, certainly one of the major criticisms I think of that I've made of libertarians is that we lack a tactical libertarianism, whereas the left has the little red cookbook, right? Mao Zedong. They have a ready-made plan to enact socialism and communism that they've been successfully implementing around the world for, well over 100 years. Where is our tactical, practical plan to implement a strategy that protects our right to be left alone? I mean, it can't all hinge on just the Supreme Court, can it?
Well, no, it can't all hinge on the Supreme Court, but it also can't hinge on members of Congress who go there as libertarians and leave as big government types. I mean, it is against the everything we believe in to force somebody else to accept everything that we believe in. I mean, the essence of what we believe in is absolute, unbridled freedom of thought. Most people, when exposed properly to the virtues of freedom versus the aspects of totalitarianism, will choose freedom. They just need to be given those choices, and they need the education appropriate to understand that one leads to happiness and the other leads to conformity. And conformity can never lead to happiness in a society that extols freedom. Does our society extol freedom anymore? I don't think so.
Judge, one of my favorite. I do as well, Judge. One of my favorite authors, H.L. Mencken, once said that I believe in only one thing, liberty, but I do not believe in liberty enough to want to force it upon anyone. There's a bit of an oxymoron to that statement, though, if you think about it, Judge. So, in enacting the Bill of Rights, for example, the founding fathers believed in liberty, but they believed in liberty so much that they wanted to force it on everyone, meaning that they would pass the Constitution and enact the Bill of Rights, regardless of anyone in the states who might have voted against it, and they went through the process.
That is a terrific observation. If one were to look at what the Federalists did, the chicanery and even violence in which they participated in order to get the Constitution ratified, without the proper names in there, you would think you were looking at the history of Russia rather than the history of the United States. And I do agree, which is why this piece I wrote today extols the virtue of secession, of leaving the government if you want, rather than living in a government that is totalitarian. You have the right to leave. My town has the right to leave the county. The county has the right to leave the state. The state has the right to leave the feds. I mean, Lincoln, of course, waged a horrific war in order to prevent that from happening, because they needed the tax base and the tariffs from the ports in which the departing states provided. It's a fascinating question, the concept of ratifying the Constitution. I don't think more than a third of the people wanted the Constitution. And many of them refused to accept it until a Bill of Rights had been added, which, of course, as we know, was added 2 years later. And that Bill of Rights, they're negative rights, not positive rights. They don't offer anything. They restrain the government from interfering. So what do people do who want the government to interfere? What did people do who wanted to be under George III? How many people in 1776 wanted to stay subject to George III? According to Professor Bernard Balin of Harvard, who since has passed away, more than a third wanted to stay subject to George III, and yet they were forced to leave him anyway.
Well, Judge, you and I, we know because we understand the difference between positive rights and negative rights, and we understand the concept of legal positivism, which of course I learned from you. The anti-federalists were hypocrites for demanding the Bill of Rights because they didn't believe in legal positivism. They didn't believe in the idea that you had to, in order to have rights, that you had to write them down. They knew that their enemies, the Federalists, believed in legal positivism, so they created the Bill of Rights in order to ensure that they would be defended against the legal positivists. And so I would compare this to today. Let's say, for example, you said earlier, you believe in protecting the rights of the Fabian socialists who do not believe in protecting your rights. They would take your guns, they would take your freedom of speech. The National Socialists, the right-wing, national conservatives, they don't believe in your freedom of speech or your freedom of trade or commerce. They don't believe in your rights and things like that. So in essence, Judge, we would have to force liberty on them so that they could have a society where they could have their beliefs. They could be Nazis. The commies could be commies. But we are willing. People like you and I believe that, don't tread on me. If they're trying to force their worldview on us, then we're like the anti-federalists who say, no, 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 no. While we don't want to force our worldview on you, we're going to have a Bill of Rights, and we're going to defend it with our muskets and flintlocks if we have to, because we're going to live in a free country where Nazis and communists can have their freedom of speech, but we're not going to live in a country where communists and Nazis can force their worldview on the rest of us, because it's not a free country. And secession might be, a nice thing to aim for, but at the end of the day, it's not just that I love liberty so much that I'm forcing it on others. I'm forcing it on others so that I can have it for myself. Is that not what the anti-federalists were in essence doing?
Well, I mean, I would look at it a little bit differently, and I would say that the purpose of the Bill of Rights was to restrain the Federalists. Now, it obviously didn't work, because the first thing the Federalists did was to enact the Alien and Sedition Acts, which made it a crime to criticize the government. So you had the same generation, in some cases the same human beings, that had just ratified Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, enacting a statute that punished the freedom of speech. It sunset right before Jefferson became president, because the Federalists feared that Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists would use it against them. I can't imagine that would have happened. Who knows? But the Alien and Sedition Acts died on midnight as Jefferson was being inaugurated. So look, can you force freedom on other people? No, you can't force freedom on other people, but you can stop people from interfering with yours. I view the Bill of Rights as a well-intended but ultimately fruitless, although occasionally great things happen. The Supreme Court does the right thing. Effort to restrain the government. The Constitution has terribly, miserably, unequivocally failed to restrain the government. But every once in a while, the courts will do the right thing with property, with freedom of speech, with due process.
So,
when George W. Bush and Lindsey Graham concocted all kinds of, did you hear what he said the other day? Killing Russians, best money we ever spent. And who did he say that to? Vladimir Zelensky. Okay. Concocted legislation to strip enemy combatants of their due process rights. The Supreme Court rejected every single one of them. So occasionally the courts do the right thing.
So, but Judge, even, and again, I'm pressing this just because, again, these are internal struggles that I wage in my own mind in order to reason things out. if you are attacked violently by communists or by Nazis, and they have committed themselves to your absolute destruction, not just the destruction of you ideologically, but the destruction of your own body. Like, so for example, say, the rise of a new National Socialist Party wants to, enact their regime here in the United States, we would fight back with violence, Judge.
Yes.
And in
Yes,
such
we would.
and in such a way, we would be then, as the victors, able to perhaps write a new constitution or be the governors of this country, of our defeated foes. If they desired to remain committed to fighting against us, I mean, would a process of denazification really be anti-libertarian?
Something I hadn't hadn't thought of. I mean, that's really apocalyptic.
It is. That's what
Austin.
World War II was, right? It was the apocalypse. After the fall of Imperial Japan, there began the process of separation of church and state. It was, we threatened to burn down their Shinto temples if they did not declare that the emperor was not a god. I mean, the concept of separation of church and state was a preservation method seen as by the Americans. The denazification of Germany after World War II was seen as a self-defense method by Americans, because it was an ideology committed to our destruction. And they still are, many of them who are still out there, Judge, committed to your and my destruction. And I just wonder, at what point can we say we're not being left alone? Don't tread on me must mean what it means. And at some point, like, they've declared war on us, Judge. When can we fight back?
Well, under the non-aggression principle, and again, we have to be faithful to what we believe in. Otherwise, we are as positivistic as they are. Whatever the law is written down is the law, irrespective of any values or eternal truths. The non-aggression principle says all uninitiated aggression is illicit. So somebody's got to point a gun at you before you have the right to shoot back.
Sure.
But you have to be able to own the gun and use it and carry it.
Which is why Thomas Jefferson ran, and why the Anti-Federalists fought back and wrote the Bill of Rights. It's such an oxymoron in so many ways, Judge, because we admire the Anti-Federalists, and I'm glad that they wrote the Bill of Rights. But if we don't believe in legal positivism, then how can we support the Bill of Rights? And we could say it's useless all day, but I'm sure you must support the concept of incorporation of the Bill of Rights into the states, because, as you and I have said before, this is a strategy for liberty. So, I mean, the 14th Amendment expanded liberty in a way, but that's legal positivism.
Well, I mean, legal positivism is only wrong when it articulates a principle of law contrary to the natural law. So if legal positivism writes down a principle of natural law, which is what the First Amendment does, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Why? Because the freedom of speech is a natural right. After the Fourth Amendment, that means no government shall make any law abridging the freedom of speech. When Woodrow Wilson was president, he dispatched a young agent in the Justice Department to arrest Princeton students. He had just been the president of Princeton, for reciting the Declaration of Independence aloud outside draft offices in Trenton, New Jersey. When questioned by it, his answer was, well, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. I'm not the Congress. The First Amendment only restrains Congress. That is a legal positivistic interpretation of the natural right to speak freely. By the way, what was the name of the young federal agent dispatched to arrest the Princeton students? John Edgar Hoover.
Surprise.
The rest is history.
Judge, so then I want to talk about your column here. I'm having way too much fun here. I've got to get to both.
We'll talk about whatever you want, Austin. This is the highlight of my week, and I missed it last week.
I know we're having so much fun here, Judge. Very briefly though, Che Guevara, for example, murdered gays, burned books, declared war against the United States, claimed that if he got nuclear weapons, he would use them against the United States, as clear as threat as any. Thankfully, he died before the nuclear weapons made it to Cuba, but they were there for a short period after his death. So then, would you say, Judge, that, knowing that your dislike for the CIA, that perhaps that the assassination of Che Guevara was the one good thing the CIA ever did?
Hard for me to believe there's any good thing that the CIA did.
I mean, listen, Judge. There's a lot of libertarians who have a lot of warm feelings for Pinochet, for Augusto Pinochet of Chile. Our friend Milton Friedman famously went down there with the Chicago Boys to rewrite their economy, and there a lot of libertarians make the joke that the more
when did Milton Friedman become a libertarian? After he died?
Hold on, what?
Thank you, Federal Reserve.
So, Judge, there's an old libertarian joke that says that the GDP rose in proportion to the number of communists that Pinochet threw out of helicopters. But we'll get to that at a later time. Judge, before we let you go, I'd love to hear about your new column that we can read weekly at judgenap.com. This week's is a real banger. I'd love for you to share it with us.
Can the Environmental Protection Administration regulate mud puddles? I mean, it sounds like it's a joke. And the Supreme Court unanimously said no. I mean, this is a tale of an administrative agency interpreting words to expand its own authority, and in doing so, denying landowners the opportunity to use their property to an economically viable use. And this went on countless times until a couple decided to challenge the Supreme Court. Second time they went to the Supreme Court. First time the court sent it back for a trial. They lost the second trial. So they've been up to the Supreme Court twice, but the Supreme Court ruled unanimously last week that sounds ridiculous, Austin, a mud puddle is not a navigable water of the United States. And therefore, when Congress authorized the EPA to regulate navigable waters of the United States, it did not authorize them to regulate mud puddles. And in their regulation of mud puddles, they prohibited all structures or economically viable use of the land within 300 feet of the mud puddle, because the use of the land might adversely affect the mud puddle. Question is, if you want to get back to positivism, suppose Congress had expressly authorized the EPA to regulate mud puddles. Would the court have ruled the same way? I don't know the answer. I would like to think that they would have upheld private property. Our Rothbardian friends believe that private property is the root of all liberty. I think you and I believe that natural rights is that private property is just one of the liberties that your natural rights protect. But the essence of private property is the right to exclude everyone, to exclude even the government.
That's
I
racist.
love saying that.
That's racist, Judge. That's what the left would say about that. But God, and all that does is just spring 2 or 3 more questions that come to mind, Judge. But dang it, I've only got 6 minutes on my Zoom call left, so I've got to let you go. Judge, these conversations I've wanted to have with you for years, questions I've wanted to ask you ever since the beginning of our friendship about positivism, about the Bill of Rights and the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. I could probably do this with you for like 2 or 3 hours. I'll just have to wait until next week, I guess, Judge.
Well,
it's great
someday
to see
we'll
you.
do it in front of a couple of thousand people and 3 or 4 television cameras for 2 or 3 hours.
I think so, Judge. It's time for us to start talking about doing a national tour. Judge and AP, what do you think? Judge,
I love it.
The host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which is blowing up on all of your social networks. Make sure you download and subscribe. Judge Andrew Napolitano, host of Judging Freedom. Thank you very much for your time today.
3:30 Eastern today, the great Colonel Douglas McGregor. How much did the United States know about before the drones hit Moscow?
Oh boy, good stuff. Judge is a leading figure on the discussion and the war in Ukraine. Make sure you tune in to Judging Freedom later today with Colonel McGregor. Thank you, Judge. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Austin. God bless you.
You as well. Thank you very much. What did you think of Judge Andrew Napolitano? Woo, boy, that discussion, I'll tell you. That's some big brain stuff right there. If you didn't know what legal positivism was, you do now. Or maybe you just have more questions and you have no idea what the hell's going on. Hey, did you hear that I was supposed to have a presidential candidate on the show today? Well, they kind of ducked on me. What the hell? Let's kind of crazy. Well, guess what? That means that you get to hear from Chris Spangle. We had a great interview with him yesterday talking about LP presidential candidates, and we were talking about DeSantis and Trump. What do you have to say? We'll take a listen to my interview from yesterday. You had a nice weekend, holiday weekend. Welcome back. I was thinking over the weekend about Dolly Madison when she made the American flag. People were probably saying, well, what should we do? What should the flag look like? I can imagine Dolly Madison asking John Adams and George Washington and all those guys, well, how should I do the stars on the flag? And I can really see George Washington just responding back saying, just spangle them bitches. We got caps to pop and bodies to drop. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. My next guest is the man that they named the Stars and Stripes after. He is Spangle. Joining us now, Chris Spangle on the show. He's the host of the Chris Spangle Show himself. He's joining us now. Good morning, Chris. Nice to see you, brother.
Austin, it's great to be with you. And, your history is more accurate than the New York Times. What can I say? I'm really proud of you.
How's that for just making up an intro on the fly right there? Chris.
Well, I've got a baby due. My wife has a baby due in like 2 weeks. I've just did 2 minutes of work. She's done all the hard work, but everyone wants us to name this child Star, and it's not going to happen, but it's a good thought.
Well, how about Apple? Or you could pull a page out of Penn Jillette's playbook and call him Moxie Crime Fighter.
There's been a lot of bad suggestions, like McKinsley, other names.
That sounds like somebody who would enjoy pumpkin spice and Uggs.
Just dressing our baby in beige with flat-brimmed hats, posting them on Instagram.
Chris, we're grateful to have you here. I hope that you had a nice holiday weekend. Looking forward to the birth of your child. Congratulations, by the way, on being a dad. Tell us, Chris, I mean, you're somebody who I've known for a long time, going way back. I think my very first job in the Libertarian Party in 2008, you and I had conversations. We spoke on the phone when you were in Indianapolis and I was in D.C. So we've been in this fight for a long time. So you're somebody who really knows politics on an intimate level, and not just Libertarian Party politics, but national level politics, because like me, you were a big Ron Paul fan, and so you sort of know the inner workings of the Republican Party too, when we fought to try and help get Ron Paul to become the presidential candidate, which I think there's probably a lot of Republicans now that wish they had pulled that vote back in the days of Romney and McCain, et cetera, et cetera. But
if I can add
go ahead.
to your introduction, I mean, I became a libertarian because I was a Republican, and I'd love to be a Republican, but I've never felt that they have reformed themselves in any meaningful sense. And in 2008, I was a reporter for a local news talk station, and they pulled 300 delegates out of the Indiana State Convention that were Ron Paul fans to prevent them from going to D.C. or to the National Convention, I should say. And, one big muckety muck in the Republican Party a few years later told me that was their biggest mistake, is that was what lit the Tea Party on fire here in Indiana. Andy Horning had the first Tea Party in 2007 in a property tax revolt, which led to Rick Santelli kind of kicking it off. I mean, it was a huge mistake, and they've never learned from it. And, if they had learned the lessons of Ron Paul and become more libertarian, I don't think that they'd have the problems that they have now.
No, I agree with you, Chris, but it has been strange to see the dark turn that the Republican Party has taken after the Tea Party years, which really gave me a lot of hope. And now I saw that the Heritage Foundation was trending this morning, calling out Biden for the debt ceiling deal and saying that they need to get more concessions. This is just 3 weeks after the Heritage Foundation came out and said, oh, well, we think capitalism and free markets really do actually need to be regulated a little bit, because they're trying to jump on the new trend of anti-capitalist republicanism that's out there. But speaking of anti-capitalist republicanism, I'd like to ask you about the DeSantis versus Trump race. Is it a surprise to you to see Donald Trump running to the left of Ron DeSantis in this race?
No, I knew. I mean, I was always very critical and took a lot of crap, even though I'm completely right. In 2020, saying that Donald Trump is completely responsible for the lockdowns and 2 stimulus packages, and wrote the third and negotiated. You can Google this article. Donald Trump was critical of the third stimulus package when he was president because Nancy Pelosi didn't make it big enough. And Donald Trump is responsible largely for our inflation. Yeah, you can say the infrastructure bill contributed. It certainly did. But when you look at the inflation that we've been suffering under, that was all architected by the president of the United States. The guy who had hired the CDC and FDA directors was Donald Trump at the time. Donald Trump bowed down, and Ron DeSantis' criticism is completely right when he just bent over and let Fauci control the country. I still have the postcard somewhere from March 2020 that says Trump's COVID plans, right? Like when Donald Trump came out and gave a press conference and said, these are my plans for shutting down the economy, and now let me step aside and let Fauci give his plan for what we ought to do. You know, Donald Trump completely failed in his major test of leadership. And then about 3 months into it, realized he was making a big mistake and started becoming the anti-COVID candidate. And nobody bought it because they all had gotten the postcards. They all had gotten Trump's, remember the first checks were delayed because Donald Trump had to put his name on them.
Oh, yeah.
So that criticism from DeSantis is totally correct. And I do think Donald Trump is completely mystified. I mean, I think if anything in this segment, we're going to talk about basically populism versus principles. And I think a lot of the populists over the last 5 years have tried to retrofit principles, the first things guys and Sohrab Ahmari and a lot of libertarians are doing this. They're flirting with Robert Kennedy Jr., who would put the Koch brothers in jail. But it's all under the guise of principle. The populist wing of the Libertarian and Republican parties try to retrofit principles, but they've really lost sight of it. I know you have taken heat for the non-aggression principle, but I think libertarians in the movement have kind of lost sight of the NAP as sort of a baseline for things, which is why we all looked at the COVID restrictions and said, this is completely against our principles. We're all against this. Anybody who is for shutting down playgrounds or forced vaccinations is not a libertarian, and they were completely right. If you're restricting the freedom of movement, you're not a libertarian. Like, I know the circumstances are tough, but the government doesn't have that right. Why don't they have that right? Because they were initiating force against people's free conscience. So, when you look at the warp speed, for instance, Donald Trump rightly is sort of mystified by the fact that he gets booed when he says he came up with warp speed. I think it's you can look at the vaccine and say, look, this did protect a lot of people, and he can say this was good. But then you can also say a lot of people were forced into it through coercion, through the work, through the government, and all that happened under Donald Trump's watch. Like, it was initiated under Donald Trump's watch. That's why he's getting booed, and he doesn't have the ability to think critically about his performance because everything he does is the best, right? So he will probably beat DeSantis despite being a big government Republican and to the left of Ron DeSantis and some of these other candidates because of memes. That's why he won in May 16. When Donald Trump goes out there and you go, and then you got Joe Biden. This guy, he doesn't know anything. And he's wandering around the stage, and then it gets shared several million times on kind of the meme pages.
He's funny.
It's hilarious. He is the funniest stand-up comedian working right now. Sorry, Dave Chappelle. And people love it and they share it, and they sort of miss a time, pre-2020 when things were pretty good and things are very bad. And people rightly blame Joe Biden for a lack of leadership and a lack of coherence. And Ron DeSantis, I think, is kind of old pudding fingers. It's how Trump defeated every Republican against all the odds in 2016 with Lil Marco and sleepy Joe Biden and we love that stuff. We love the right. What was Jeb? Low energy Jeb. I mean, that just destroyed Jeb Bush. People
remember when he made fun of Rand Paul's hair looking like spaghetti on his head?
Yeah. I mean, Trump is just a funny guy, and Republicans have gotten themselves into a place where it's not about principle. It's really about how can they make the left cry. And every time you hear a Republican or conservative or libertarian commentator talk about the left, they've sort of lost their brain. Like they have abandoned principle in order to defeat an enemy, a perceived enemy, because they spend too much time on Twitter. And Donald Trump plays into that mindset of the base very, very well. Even though Ron DeSantis, and I'm not arguing for Ron DeSantis, like I'm a firm libertarian, I would never vote for Ron DeSantis. But when you look at the record of Donald Trump and you look at the record of Ron DeSantis, you, as a conservative Republican voter, you'd go, well, this guy actually has some achievements and is the same in terms of kind of taking on the media and taking on the people we don't like. But it doesn't work because Ron DeSantis just doesn't have that same meme factor. He doesn't walk out and hug the flag, and I think
and act
he's
ridiculous,
really got a tough
right?
race.
No, you're right,
Yeah.
Chris. I agree with everything that you said. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. Glad to have you here. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to help us spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty. My current guest right now is Chris Spangle. He's the host of the Chris Spangle Show. He's joining us right now talking about DeSantis versus Trump. You're right about the whole principle thing, because the chief criticism that I'm hearing of Ron DeSantis from Trump supporters is, one, that DeSantis isn't sufficiently loyal, because without Trump, he would have never been the governor. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. And then the other one is that they just find Ron DeSantis to be boring, right? As if that is a disqualification for president of the United States. I remember when people used to disqualify Ron Paul because they're like, he just sounds so crash. He just sounds like an angry old man, blah, blah, blah. But this is how people choose their candidates. They're picking candidates for the sort of gladiatorial arena, right? That's why they're picking their candidates. But frankly, Ron DeSantis, his record when he was voting in the legislature, fairly libertarian. I wouldn't say Thomas Massie levels, but pretty close.
Yeah, I think all these guys have changed, though. Massie has stuck to his principles. Rand Paul has stuck to his principles, although they have at times bended those principles to go along to get along. Ron Paul did that. He was a big pork barrel spender, saying, look, it's going to go back to the executive branch. They're going to spend it, so I might as well spend it on my district so I can get reelected. You look at Rand Paul's endorsements of people like Roy Moore, and you just go, what are you doing? But there's a certain level to go along to get along. But I think Ron DeSantis, I look at the Disney fight and the punishment of a business for having an opinion he doesn't like, and you just go, all right, this guy's not the same libertarian-leaning guy that he was 10 years ago, because it's not in fashion to be a libertarian in the Republican Party anymore. There was a brief moment, I think, where, it started out with, Milton Friedman. All of the conservative movement kind of got its intellectual heft from Hayek. So Hayek comes along and gives intellectual weight to the anti-FDR movement. And all of the people who kind of developed their political philosophy in the 40s, 50s, 60s, like Ronald Reagan, like Margaret Thatcher, all looked at Milton Friedman, all looked at Hayek and said, okay, here is a person that is serious, that is taking on Keynesian economics, taking on the New Deal. And, Thatcher famously holding up the Constitution of Liberty by F.A. Hayek, this free market economist, and going, this is our Bible. This is what we need to do. Ronald Reagan saying the heart of conservatism is libertarianism. Now, they meant it minus the non-intervention part. It's really Ron Paul and the paleoconservative wing that interjected that piece to it. And now that has become the predominant piece. I mean, you look at people like Dave Smith and Scott Horton promoting Robert Kennedy Jr., who would put, who said on video, I'd put the Koch brothers in jail for disagreeing with me on, climate change, which is the exact same mentality as locking somebody up for disagreeing on vaccines. And they're promoting him and saying, well, he's right on the right things. Well, you're picking and choosing what's right? You've got to stay to a principle, which is if you're initiating force against other people through the government to coerce change, then you're immoral. And so we've kind of unmoored ourselves in the libertarian and conservative movements from basic libertarian principles because of fashion, People want to wear the right
Yes.
fashion.
That's
They
right.
want to look good on Twitter.
It's
and
true.
they are
I will
willing,
never
you know,
forget. I will never forget Chris going to CPAC in like 2010 at the height of the Tea Party and seeing normies wearing Rand Paul shirts and just thinking to myself, "Oh my God, like this is it. This is how you win." But I mean, you could tell that they, this was before the word NPCs was out there, but I mean, you could tell they were all just NPCs, but they were just wearing the Rand Paul shirts because they wanted to fit in.
few people were as disliked as you, AP. I mean, how did you and I, pro-life, former Republican, Glenn Beck libertarians, end up on the left wing of the Libertarian Party somehow, and then like the drop off from you and me on the left wing is down to like, legitimate socialist libertarians, and that's only happened in like the last 3 or 4 years. But it's just it's because people are looking at it through fashion. They look at Chris Spangle, they look at Austin Peterson, and they go, well, because these people are not populist, because these people look at the things from a more pragmatic view and aren't totally sold on things like the Mises Caucus being an effective organization, they must be leftists. That's why I've never liked Michael Heiss, because he has actively tried to say that we are libertarians and the whole brand is left. Well, no, I just don't buy that that Hoppe and the autocratic view of libertarianism, the view that Orban is a plus for liberty, is real. And so that gets you branded a leftist now. And the Republicans have their own version. If you're not in on the cult of personality on Trump, you're not with us.
Well, what's hilarious is that
it affects everybody.
The Republicans on the populist, quote unquote, right in the Republican Party openly advocate for socialistic policies, and then they have the nerve, the gall to call other people socialists. But let's narrow this down here and talk about it, since you brought it up, Michael Heiss and the Mises Caucus the other day. I was watching a video, and frequently when I watch Dave Smith's videos, he's usually very funny, and I agree with a lot of the things that he said. But the other day I was listening to a video that somebody posted of him, unironically, where he was saying that, well, minarchism, he's like, Joseph Stalin is a minarchist. I mean, Bernie Sanders is really a minarchist. And I just cringed to hear that. I was kind of like, what in the hell are you talking about? And it just struck me as a sort of like of a justification for anarcho-capitalism that really doesn't need to be said. I mean, do you really have to make shit up and try and argue that? Do you really believe that Joseph Stalin was a minarchist? That Bernie Sanders, somebody who believes in limited government, for those of you who are tuning in who have no idea what I'm talking about. But I mean,
yeah, it's the Night Watchman state. It's the Robert Nozick version of libertarianism, where you have a night watchman state where basically the courts are private.
Right.
Because, my court says your court is illegitimate, then we have a battle. That's why I consider myself a minarchist. You privatize everything down to the courts, and you keep the only allowable centralization of force is the courts. Yeah. That's minarchism. Does that sound like Bernie Sanders?
No, it doesn't, and it's a little ridiculous. I mean, it's the first time that I've ever heard Dave say something that was kind of a head scratcher to me. But I think they're really what it looks as if it is happening is if
now you've criticized the Pope, AP.
I know
they're going to tell on you.
Dude,
Twitter's going to tell them, and then you're going to be called to the principal's office.
Do you remember? You probably remember like 10 years ago or something like that when I criticized Ron Paul a little bit, and there was a huge backlash. It was like this massive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Backlash. I still.
Well, you were stupid about the non-aggression principle, but we all forgave you, man.
Sure. Thoughts on post-libertarian Pete Quinones as Quest Fanning? I don't really know anything about Pete Quinones, but I just want to get your take on the possibility of Dave Smith for president. I mean, like, everybody says he's going to be the LP guy. I know there's a bunch of other people running. I've got a guy coming in tomorrow, Mike Termott, who's coming in. He's a libertarian presidential candidate. He actually sounds fairly impressive, but I mean, how are you feeling about the post-AP-LP?
I mean, listen, I'll caveat this that I had to do homework because I just don't follow the Libertarian Party anymore, not like I used to. I consider myself a small L libertarian. I don't really view politics as a mean for change. I had an experience here producing a podcast over the last 4 years where I've gone to basically interview the elite of our city, the movers and shakers of politics, civil society, business. None of them have any awareness of the Libertarian Party of Indiana, which is one of the strongest affiliates, or how it works. It doesn't really make a huge impact. And that kind of unmoored me from I mean, it's a great social club. I love all the people in the Libertarian Party that I've met over the years. I think it's a fun exercise. But I will say, when you look at the opportunity that the Libertarian Party has in 2024 is tremendous, and they're going to completely screw it up. I mean, there's always a bump in membership and revenue after a presidential election. We saw a little bit of that, but it was blunted. And now we're just seeing the floor fall out from under the Massie's leadership and the leadership of Angela McArdle. Membership is dropping. You know, they're trying to put a positive spin on it, but you've got people like Reed Coverdale, I think his name is. I saw a tweet from him. This is a guy that was all sold on this movement and a part of it. And he's like, you know, we're allowing these pro-war, pro-Russian speakers. We're doing these things. Like, what are we doing? You know, they're saying, they sound like me in 2018 going, this direction's not good and it's not going to work. You know, you've been around and you've run for president in the LP. At this point in a year out from the convention, you've always got guys like Mike Tiermont or Lars Mapstead or Joshua Rodriguez, people that you've kind of not heard of. You know, Larry Sharp had a debate and had some of these folks in. You always sort of listen to them, you know, but they're not, maybe they'll gain momentum, but they're not, you know, I've seen that Jacob Hornberger's running. He was a Mises Caucus favorite, did not get it done last time, but maybe this time. Chase Oliver's running. I don't know if he's declared aligned with the Classical Liberty Caucus, which is sort of the orthodox libertarian classical, you know, that they're a little more aligned with maybe the Libertarian Party that you and I knew back in the day, although less radical, I think. So, you know, Chase is running. Chase and Jacob at this point of the declared candidates would kind of be the race. But I saw Spike Cohen say on Twitter yesterday he hasn't ruled anything out. I think if he ran for president, Spike would probably beat everybody, because Spike is a guy that everybody likes, everybody gets along with. There's always fringe people who hate him. Oh, he was aligned with Vermin Supreme, screw him. Or, you know, he's aligned with the Mises Caucus, screw him. But, you know, you can't look at what Spike is doing and the work that Spike is doing and go, that guy's all in for libertarian causes. He's making change. He's building a huge network through You Are the Power across the country that he could turn on.
All right. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I got to cut that interview a little bit short. It's almost 9 a.m. I know. Yeah, I know. Don't be too disappointed. The AP show will be back tomorrow morning, but I am going to be taking the day off on Friday.
No, God!
What are you going to do? Cry about it?
God, please, no!
Please.
No!
We're not a bunch of leftists here. Sometimes AP gets a day off. But I still represent the message of economic freedom and personal liberty, even on my days off. Sometimes I like to post on socials, so follow me over there. AP for Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere that you have a social media website, I'm probably there. And my handle is always AP for Liberty. That's AP, the number 4, AP for Liberty. Did you see my wife made some awesome golf balls at the Wake Up America show website, the AP for Liberty shop this morning? She is so lovely. Can't we just give her a little round of applause, my lovely Stephanie? Because somebody had bought some Make Taxation Theft Again golf balls, and so I thought, you know, wouldn't it be fun to have some golf balls that said, here comes a bad word. Here we go. Fuck around and find out. Because then somebody's like, you know, which golf ball is yours? Fuck around and find out. I'm like, excuse me? No, it's one that says fuck around and find out. Those would be some great golf balls. You can get those as well as many other great items over at ap4libertyshop.com. That's AP, the number 4, ap4libertyshop.com. Check it out right now. We also have a new influencer program that will pay you to help sell products over to the store. You get 10% of each sale, and the person who uses your coupon code gets 5% discount on there, right? So I lose 15%. Oh, well, I'm more than happy to help more liberty lovers help spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty. If you're interested in joining our influencer program today, you can sign up over on the community page. Head over to ap4libertyshop.com. Click on the influencers tab. You'll see, if you're checking it on your mobile device, it'll be in that little hamburger menu. You scroll down and it says influencers. Click on that. Sign up today. We'll get you approved in the system. You'll get a coupon code that you can use to help sell products. And if you do, again, you get 10% of every sale. Why not add a little bit extra cash to your wallet for this summer while spreading the message of freedom? Why not? Great way, right? Get yourself an awesome All Gun Laws Are an Infringement shirt. All right, I got to run, but I will see you tomorrow before I take the day off on Friday to go fishing with my dad. on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupamericashow.com.
So say it with me. See, say Broadway. The future is ours. Thank you.
And topping our news on this very